CM, the doctors at FDA that approved this drug. Okay, that is how deep the pharma ties are. And it's interesting because I've used terms like pharma industry acts like organized crime, and people that's hyperbolic. I'll give you an example. The company Celgene. In the 90s, Celgene found a drug called thalidomide. They didn't find it. Thalidomide is the infamous drug that caused the terrible flipper babies, the terrible birth defects. It was developed by a company called Chemie Grünenthal. And the developers of the drug were Nazi chemists, Nazi war criminals. That's how soiled this whole story is. It was taken off the market, but it had some efficacy in leprosy, they discovered. So this company, Celgene, got the rights for thalidomide. They used their white shoe law firm. They branded it. So they got thalidomide. They started to use it in leprosy. It cost pennies, 10, 11 cents a pill to make. They were selling it, I think, for $6 a pill. Then they saw an opportunity in the cancer market, in myeloma. Myeloma is a plasma cell cancer that has no cure. And thalidomide has mild immunomodulatory effects and some anti-angiogenic effects. And there's a place for it, sort of. Anyway, they got this approved to treat myeloma. Now, mind you, this is a drug that costs pennies to make. They rebranded it, and thalidomide it's called phthalimide, and then the other one is called Revlimid. In Revlimid, all they did was they took out one oxygen atom and added a nitrogen atom. All of the R&D that they say cost so much money was done by these Nazi war criminals. Phthalimid, which costs pennies to make, they sell for $200 a pill. Revlimid, they sell for $700 a pill, okay? Revlimid comes to about $17,000 per month, okay, for cancer patients. They were bought by Bristol Myers Squibb, and the price kept going up. So I use this analogy when people say, well, how could you say it's an organized crime? Well, let's just think. They have a captive audience, desperate cancer patients. It's like if there was a terrible drought, and people were dying of thirst, but I was the only person with water source. And I started selling the water. I'll make a few bucks. The water cost me 11 cents. I started selling it for 50 cents. But then, I've got a captive audience. I rise the price up, and start selling it for $100 a bottle, okay? That's what organized crime does. That's what pharma did with this pill. That's what pharma does across the board, okay? And we've allowed this culture to happen. To fully understand the journey from healer to wealthy pharmaceutical agent is illustrated again with Avastin. Susan Desmond-Hellmann was a famous oncologist. And I've interviewed her, lovely woman. She had an interesting story also. She was an idealistic young doctor at the beginning. Her husband was an infectious disease doc, and they were in Uganda during the AIDS crisis and did a lot of really good stuff. Then pharma comes along. It's so seductive what they do. So Susan Desmond-Hellmann she started to work in global development for Genentech. She was hired. She became the leading voice of Avastin, in the development of Avastin. She left in 2009. When she left, she was making $8 million a year, and she left with a $250 million compensation package. Think of that. She became an extremely wealthy woman. Another famous oncologist came in right after her, another female doctor called Sandra Horning. Okay, Sandra Horning came out of Stanford. She was a lymphoma expert. She was hired by Genentech, global research and development head and so forth, and she championed Avastin in breast cancer. She'd been a former ASCO president also, so she was at the height of her career, and that's the gold for pharma. They look for doctors like that because they have tremendous influence. Sandra Horning, also a lovely woman, a tow-haired, colored woman from the Midwest beaming with optimism. I profiled her for a journal I worked for, interviewed her several times. She was hired by Genentech, and she began to champion Avastin. Even after Hamburg began to revoke the indication, she was on Capitol Hill. She was at the FDA championing this drug, a woman who knew that the drug did more harm than good for these desperate women with breast cancer. Yet, she was a vehicle for the pharmaceutical company Genentech. She ended up, she worked there for several years and then moved on to another. I think she's working for Gilead now. They go from one pharma company to the other. And the line they always use is, you're going to pharma. Actually, the salespeople say, I'm going to the dark side. They're honest enough to say that. The doctors always say, I'm broadening my horizons, okay, by going to pharma, where I can have global reach. A $250 million compensation package gives you plenty of reach. So that is the incestuous relationship that has developed in this industry. And because of that, they've built a dogma wall, a fortress around there are plenty of very promising avenues of therapy out there. But they're blockaded by the FDA, who says, well, they haven't been through this clinical trial. Think of the irony. Think of the irony here. Oh, that hasn't been proved by the gold standard clinical trial. The same gold standard clinical trial that Rick Pazdur, that Janet Woodcock, that Margaret Somberg use to approve drugs that don't work, that don't have any survival benefit, that are actually toxic placebos. And the majority of cancer drugs that are being approved right now do not extend life. That's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth. So there's a huge problem here, and it's a triumvirate. Okay, it's the FDA, it's pharma, and the oncology community, the healers themselves, that are warped into this sphere. It seems like an impossible challenge to pierce this armor that they have, because their messaging is so powerful. They create this semantical illusion for the public, and the lay public don't have this knowledge about this. They're out in the dark. Just think, this doctor that I showed, a well-known doctor, that showed him that the Genentech's own data state that Avastin does not extend survival or improve symptoms. He was shocked by that. So the lay public is in a totally different world. They're not within this sphere. So it's a tremendously difficult task. But I truly believe that we can, through information, through awareness, through the opportunity that Mark has given me right here to speak directly to the audience, the public, about this and share my knowledge of it, that we can make a difference. We can change this system. It's going to be an uphill battle, a tremendous uphill battle. They're intimidating people. These pharma companies, they spin tales. They're as cool as blue smoke. And they spin these tales. They have a very carefully crafted messaging department, okay? And they're incredibly intimidating. They're powerful people, but they can't intimidate me. It's impossible. They cannot intimidate me. This awareness